Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and of course, I am joined by my co-host, Aiden Buhner, whose shutdown is imminent. Today, we're here to talk about a game system whose shutdown is imminent. Boom! The Nintendo 3DS, a little prop comedy for you. Love this system to death. We're here to talk about the history of it, our thoughts, and sort of the library and its history and its place in Nintendo's history. But if you are a fan of Nintendo, of the 3DS, of Nintendo retrospectives, please indulge me. It would make me oh so titillated. Hit that subscribe button. Subscribe and like and join Discord. That link, top description. While you're down there, like and subscribe. You know what I'm saying? So nice I had to say it twice, Abram. Also, I sort of forgot and I started going into the intro again.
Yes.
Abram, we're here to talk about the 3DS, a system that you and I have a lot of experience with and we're both passionate about, but I'm interested to talk about the library and history as a whole because it's not something I find myself thinking about too much because it's in that interesting place of where it's not old enough for me to have like a super huge amount of nostalgia for it or like think back, oh, whoa, that's a retro game system, but it's not new enough to where it's like the current thing.
Yeah, there's a lot. I really have so much I want to say about 3DS because 3DS is, as I've been revisiting it recently with the shutdown being imminent and me going back to rebuy games that I sold or buy new things that I never had during the system's commercial lifetime, it really brought back into focus just how much I love this system and how it really is in contention for me with GameCube as my favorite piece of Nintendo hardware.
Sure.
And I mean, I played these fucking things to death. I've had some variety of 3DS since Christmas 2011 when I got an aqua blue system. And I played that until the circle pad was leaving an indent on the top screen and the paint was chipping off and the thing was all like cracked and broken because I'd drop it because I'd take it everywhere. And now I got a 3DS XL.
New 3DS XL. Yeah. New. Don't forget the new.
Before that, I had the Smash Brothers 3DS XL. I shouldn't say too much wear because shortly thereafter, I got this rig in 2015, which I have also, like my original 3DS, played to excess to where the paint's coming off. Yes. I've got a leaky stylus port.
Yeah.
The cartridge slot.
Always dripping out.
Yeah, the cartridge slot, which makes me a little bit nervous, doesn't always read the game, which is why I'm very glad about it.
No, yeah, I've had that problem.
Where I have quite a significant portion of my library digitally. I have just played these systems to death. And
the family of systems.
Yeah, the family of systems.
And actually, I do think that's the best place to start the sort of retrospective is the hardware, the systems of it that we've owned, our issues with it, are the successes of it. Yeah. Because I have also owned quite a few 3DSs. I wasn't there at launch. It probably took me until 2016 or something. Or 20. No. I had it in 2014. I played ORAS. 2014 is when I got mine. For Smash 3DS and a Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. And I've owned. I had a red 3DS XL as my first system. My brother had a 2DS. Red see-through 2DS, which actually I like the 2DS quite a bit. We can talk about that. And then of course I have my Galaxy Edition, which my new Nintendo 3DS Galaxy Edition, which I've gone on record saying is my favorite thing that I own. Which is a little bit of exaggeration, but also might not be. And also I have a red original 3DS that is not mine. It's someone else's. At some point it ended up in my house, and now it's just been there forever. And I've never used it, but it sits there in my stack of DSs. That includes like all my DS systems and Game Boys, stuff like that. But I like that there's such a variety of them, and each of them have their pros and cons. But I do think for me, coming down to this new Nintendo 3DS XL, I think it's easily the best piece of sole handheld hardware that Nintendo has ever made. It feels premium. I don't have the issue that I had with the DS Lite, which was my first system, where the fucking spine, the corner of it got weird and it was all floppy, and the lack of backlight on the Game Boy Advance. Like, there's just not the issues with this, and it feels very modern and much more substantial than other Nintendo handhelds have.
Yeah, I mean, I will say personally, this guy's a little bit too big. I do wish I had the standard.
Well, you also have the brain of a mouse. You're a normal sized person, but you like everything to be small.
I do. I never had the new 3DS. I would love to have one. They are very expensive nowadays to track down, but I think you're right. What's really great about new 3DS is the ways that it slowly addressed a lot of the issues that the hardware had accumulated, especially when this came out in, I believe, March 2015. They were saying, okay, look, we're more than halfway through the life cycle, but there's still some years left. We need some more gas in the tank. Let's put this together. And between the C-Stick, the enhanced 3D, putting the amiibo functionality right on the touchscreen as opposed to having the
Perfect.
little
I have an
I
NFC
do too.
scanner that's outside of my. I don't know where it is, but I did own one at one point in time.
Yeah, me too. And so everything about this device, I
And
agree.
of course,
Yeah,
extra
ZLZR.
bumpers, which I've never used. In fact, I don't think I own any games that can even use them.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely more situational. It's largely Circle Pad Pro and enhanced games, and then some things like Smash you can use these for also. But I think, Tucker, it's interesting that we talk about the new 3DS as almost an apex of Nintendo's hardware, because I think it's important to also return to where the 3DS began, where and that was absolutely not the case.
No. God. Now, I said I have
Yeah.
in my possession, actually it's not here, but it's in my house in Texas, I have a original 3DS. And I've held it in my hand. I've probably turned it on once or twice. And I am of the complete opposite opinion of you, is that this is the perfect size.
Sure.
I think that the blowing up of some of the images make them look a little fuzzy, but I would rather sacrifice that for the clarity that allows for, because you have seen and held the original 3DS, and those screens are fucking tiny, and especially when you're looking at the touchscreen, it's like tickling a postage stamp, and I never want to do that.
Yeah, it's very much pocket sized, and there were strange things about that, like the telescoping stylus, which was not always reliable in various things. But I'm not even necessarily talking about build quality issues. What I mean in larger part is the way that the 3DS, and I think a lot of people forget this now, did very, very, very poorly when it released.
Yeah.
Not only
lack of launch games, I think, a big part of that. Notoriously, they had to slash price. They had to offer bonuses to people. They had to start rolling out a good amount of exclusives.
Yeah.
A little too late. Not too late, because obviously the system has done fine for itself, but too late for that launch batch of people.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it didn't end up mattering because the system sold well over 80 million units, which is a incredible success. Obviously, only about half of what DS did. But DS released in a sort of pre-smartphone environment, so it was never going to be able to touch that. And in a sort of era in which people were catastrophizing, saying that handheld gaming was totally dead, 80 million is so far and beyond what people thought the 3DS was capable of. But the catastrophizing was pretty spot on in the early era of 3DS, wherein it launched pretty well, but then very, very, very quickly fell off of a cliff, in large part not only to the launch titles, as you're saying, but to the $250 price tag, which got the now infamous but incredibly necessary price drop within, I think it was about 6 months removed from release, bringing the system down to $179.99 in the US, which was accompanied by, quite famously, a letter from Iwata basically apologizing for the price cut, because obviously it put the people who just shelled out a significant amount of money for 3DS in kind of a shitty position. Now, of course, they were handsomely compensated with a lot of free software, including those GBA ambassador titles, which we as regular owners never even got.
No.
But it was...
Which is still one of the weirdest things Nintendo has ever done, is make exclusive games, ports of games that are exclusive to this system that are literally not available even possibly otherwise. I think that's a bad decision. Offering them for free, I think, was the compensation, but making them exclusive and never even... I mean, I'm sure there were conversations, but never even like saying, "Oh, this might come. This might we're going to approach that later down the line once the eShop and the virtual console is a little more substantial." Not revisiting those is very, very, very strange.
I mean, they did revisit them. They're just on Wii U, but that's that's a completely different conversation with the oddities of the Wii U eShop. The larger point being that, in what was rare for, speaking of the Wii U, rare for Nintendo doing that era was say, look, we need to push hardware, so we will cut the price. And I read about this when I was writing about the 3DS for Handheld History, in that the Wii U never got the same treatment. There was no aggression from Nintendo to get Wii U's in people's homes. When that sunk, sorry guys, we're keeping that thing at $300. The Wii U did not drop in price. The 3DS, Iwata was very aggressive about bringing that price down, and it came at the perfect time because that fall had a really remarkable slate of titles for 3DS. Not only Mario Kart 7, which remains one of the best-selling 3DS games, but Super Mario 3D Land, and 2 ports, which really demonstrated the power of the system in Star Fox 3D, but principally Ocarina of Time 3D. So there's really a perfect storm to get 3DS actually off the ground after its failure to launch back in March. So that's a really interesting early era of 3DS, which I think a lot of people overlook when we think back on the legacy of the system.
Yeah, what's interesting about the 3DS when we're talking about it retrospectively is that unlike many systems, there are very clear eras to how the system was treated, approached by the public, promoted by Nintendo. You talk about that first 2 years, and it's a little bit rocky. The library's not quite there yet. Aggressive price testing. We're having fucking exclusive virtual console games. What the hell is that? And then there's the bulk of the system's life cycle, which is a healthy release of first-party games, introducing more downloadable games for a handheld system, although, DSiWare had a few, but making their big games downloadable for the first time on a handheld system. And that was for, the meat of the system's life cycle was, 4.5 years, whatever that is. But then there's also another very clear era, which is as soon as you hit, late 2016, I'd say Sun and Moon are probably like the last thing out of this era. We're starting the Switch's hype cycle, and one of them is going to say, hey, this is not replacing the 3DS, whatever, but it becomes very clear that from a software output perspective is that they're shifting gears entirely towards the Switch, and we start getting a bunch of late era 3DS games that people don't really care about and are like half of them are ports, some of them are really different and unique, and some of them don't do almost none of them do very well, and that's like a very clear hard cut different era of the 3DS. And because most systems don't have that kind of cut into eras, it makes it a lot more distinct to talk about, because you can say, hey, early era 3DS, normal era 3DS, and very clear late era 3DS.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about the late era 3DS software is that I don't even really think it was bad until, I don't know, mid-2018. By mid-2018, you already knew that the Switch was well on its way, so there's no real jeopardy. I mean, there's no situation in which Nintendo says, yeah, guys, you know what? Fuck it. The new system is great. The old one sucks. We're not supporting the old one. Goodbye. Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be had, and people are saying on Twitter in that we are in that era right now with Switch. We just don't know it yet. But you think about the way that even through 2017, we were getting new IP on the system. In the case of Ever Oasis, Metroid came back. Metroid, for all the prominence it's enjoying right now on Switch, came back on 3DS in 2017. And we had Pikmin return there. And now we can talk about the quality of those various games, but I really think that you had to get through that holiday season before it was pretty obvious that, 3DS is now really just sputtering things out. And there were still lovely titles like WarioWare Gold, but for the most part, it was... we're placating. We got a couple more ports and projects that we got to wrap up, but we're done now.
But the ports is actually something I want to talk about in terms of 3DS, because it's not an element of the 3DS that I think about very much, but it does make up a sizable, not a huge, but sizable chunk of the 3DS's library is ports from across Nintendo's history, from ports of N64 games, as we're talking about, Star Fox 64 3D, Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D. Those are a little bit earlier in the system's life cycle, but then at the end, as I was saying, that's pretty heavily backfilled with a lot of ports from Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, which is a port that no one ever asked for and no one ever bought. Luigi's Mansion, that's a GameCube port. We've never gotten a GameCube remake like that otherwise. Ports of Wii U games in Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World, in like a demake of Hyrule Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Legends. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, absolutely. Like, there's such and even remakes of the Mario and Luigi games, which added like a little bit of content and redid the visuals, but otherwise were no one really cared about. And that is, I think, where we can feel that energy shift a little bit into the Switch, where we were having those conversations of, are there too many ports? But I never really thought about it in terms of the 3DS's life cycle. Is there are a lot of ports on the 3DS, and most of them people don't really care about. And I think that's why it's not discussed that much, is because outside of the better versions, or quote unquote better versions of Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, lots of the ports are just like, those are available, but like, really? Why?
Yeah, I agree and I disagree. I actually think that the 3DS has some of maybe the strongest examples of Nintendo efficiently adding older software and remasters and ports and remakes
Sure.
into their library, because it's important to remark that the 3DS has a very deep library of exclusive
Yeah,
software.
yeah.
And when you look at these titles that came over, they were coming over from a myriad of different systems. I mean, you think about early Switch, and there was, as I was critical of at the time, not so much anymore, but at the time, of the Wii U port, because suddenly
Yes.
we're just backfilling this new library with games we just played.
Yep.
The 3DS was not only giving quite substantive overhauls to a lot of games, but we are pulling, as you're saying, everywhere from N64
Yeah.
all the way up to Wii U. Now, it was certainly way less interesting by the time we reached that late era. You're 100%
Yeah.
right about that. No one gives a fuck to play Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World. Everybody wants the amiibo. Nobody wants.
Or Mario Maker 3DS, which is just a worse game.
Yeah, that's sort of the period of time in the titles where you can see Nintendo was very obviously treading water and looking for games to release. But even in the case of things like Luigi's Mansion and Mario and Luigi, I think that those were quite smart and quite efficient releases, and the sort of thing I'd want more of out of Nintendo, because those just repurposed the engines that made original games to bring older titles back. And you can see when you look at the library, this applied to original titles as well. The ways in which the Link Between Worlds engine became Triforce Heroes, the way in
Yeah.
which Triple Deluxe became Robobot. It's no different than the way
Mm-hmm.
in which, after Alpha Dream turned out two new Mario and Luigi games, they also gave us two remakes in the same engine. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that killed
Sure.
the studio, but that was large. That
Yeah.
was a much larger issue than just that in and of itself. A much
Mm-hmm.
more salient example is Luigi's Mansion, as you're saying, in which clearly we just took and retooled what we did with Dark Moon to give us this
Mm-hmm.
title, which obviously didn't come at the cost of Luigi's Mansion 3, which was
Yeah.
announced later the year that that title came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it was actually quite a smart decision on Nintendo's behalf and their studios and their partners' behalf to bring so many games over. And much like Super Mario 64 DS did for the DS at launch, illustrate really what the 3DS was capable of. By
Yeah.
2016, we already knew, so it wasn't that impressive. But
Yeah.
that's not. I don't
Yeah.
even really care at that point. We're like attacking the 3DS through the vector of like clear games that are clearly just designed to get to the Switch. When you look
Yeah.
back at early 3DS, having those N64 games and having them look as good as they did and provide the
Yeah.
experiences
Yeah.
they did was very, very important. Especially because it
Yeah.
was
Absolutely.
Ocarina of Time. You can't forget which game they chose very strategically for that
True.
holiday season. Star Fox 64 too, of course, but particularly Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, yeah, and that I think is the early era where I do commend the ports,
Yeah.
supporting the library and enhancing those games in
Yeah.
specific ways that do make them clearly different versions. But when you talk about a lot of the ports that I think do backfill the library,
Yeah.
that's where my criticisms come in. Is a lot of those games exist because they were easy, not because they
Yeah.
were better on the system, because there were significant improvements to them. No one's going to want to play Luigi's Mansion on 3DS. It looks worse. I think there might be like a couple things changed, but not major enough, like having gyro aiming in Ocarina of Time to substantially change the way you're playing that game. And then you look at like Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn and you put you in Yoshi's Woolly World. It's like those are half-assed ports.
Yeah.
Like we want a game on the system, and who cares about Epic Yarn? But whatever, make it look a little bit worse and put it on the system. Those are the ones I criticize. Not, I think there are different tiers, and of course that applies to Switch ports as well, or Wii U ports on Switch as well. But it's just something I don't hear people talk about a lot. Is the pretty substantial number of ports on there, but I think that it's not talked about very much, primarily because
Yeah.
it's not like the 3DS was lacking in major entries in every of Nintendo's franchises on
Yeah.
there. So that's not a problem at all to me. It's just something that I wanted to talk about in this
Yeah.
retrospective. It's just like, hey, I don't hear people reference that very often.
Yeah, I mean, the Switch ran cover for whatever the hell the 3DS was churning out in the last 18 months of its life or whatever. Like what that's sort of the whole thing. It was clear that the 3DS, its life cycle ended in earnest in 2017. Is sort of
Yeah,
my opinion
yeah.
on it. Even though they were able to very clearly keep selling titles through more hardware revisions late into the life
True.
cycle with
The new 2DS.
Yeah, the new 2DS XL. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
there were so many different ways that Nintendo was able to market the system to a lower and lower common denominator. And something else that I find really interesting about 3DS and hardware level, before we really get into software and memories and such, is that it's one of the few examples where Nintendo was really willing to not only cut the price, but cut the gimmick of their machine.
Yeah, of course.
The 3D was gone, what, halfway through the life cycle? And
with the 2DS, which I will look up the release date for now.
I think I'm a little bit early on that. I would say 2DS is like 2016 or 20. You have an answer for me?
2013.
2013? That's definitely not right.
Wait, I'm on the Wikipedia page for Nintendo 2DS. It says October 2013. Yeah. It released in Japan in 2016.
Well, maybe I'm waiting. Maybe. Well, would you?
Yeah. No, cool. Nintendo officially unveiled the 2DS on August 20th, 2013. Yeah. I mean, this number is everywhere. So.
Yeah, no, you're totally right.
And though in 2016, I think when it became more popular is when it was slashed down to the price of $80, which I think is probably the lowest price piece of hardware Nintendo's ever put out.
The micro might have been less, but I might be wrong about that.
But also, who the fuck cares, you know?
Yeah, no, and you're right. So that illustrates the point even more clearly in that we're so ready to say, okay, look, it's all about the games. And I think in part that almost precipitates the ways in which the Switch has given up a lot of its gimmicks.
True.
And the way in which a lot of the gimmicks it does have were designed, much like the 3D, to be superfluous to a core experience, which is just about great games. So you could lose 3D just as easily, or well, definitely more easily than like Joy-Con support or various things.
Yeah.
But it was all about, hey, we've got great games. Let's jettison as much extra shit as we can to get players to those games and still provide that premium experience for people who want this, or for people who want an $80 entry point, usually bundled with like Mario Kart 7 or another game that is of quite high regard. It was really smart, and I think that's a large part of the reason why this system remains so competitive in an environment that was not kind to it.
Yeah. Yeah, an environment that was steering away from handheld gaming at that point. The system still sold very well, and I think you're right, and why you can draw a clear delineation between the success of the 3DS and the Wii U. Of course, there's multiple reasons, but the fact that Nintendo never took any of the moves to make the Wii U competitive in that way is... People were already calling Nintendo in this era, the kids company. Their systems are just, they're toy-like, they're for children. I heard all those complaints, and I fought against them valiantly on Reddit. But the Wii U never had the 2DS version that was a lot cheaper, that had like a cheaper build, that was a little more sturdy for children. And I do think that the Wii U could have benefited from that. We always talk about the Fisher-Price feel of the gamepad, or at least I don't necessarily.
Kind of funny talks about the Fisher-Price feel of the gamepad.
But if they had made like a really toy-like, very cheap version of the gamepad, I think that and make that cost $150, $180, I think the Wii U could have sold a lot more to kids if they pushed that market. But the Wii U has its own issues. But I do like that the 3DS sort of leaned into that. They're like, yeah, it's okay that we're making this for kids with the 2DS and the new 2DS and slashing price. But because that's what made the system profitable and successful and propagate to so many people. And that's why so many of the franchises and games on here did sell very well, and why I played so many of them.
Yeah, I mean, the library is remarkable to me for so many reasons, but I think kind of principal amongst them is the way that Nintendo is willing to explore scales in the creation library. And I mean scales in a lot of different ways. I mean scales of popularity, in which both Nintendo's largest franchises and their smallest receive new entries in the system, talking about it in the sense of exploring price point, not only going from obviously the digital only, very cheap single dollar, maybe $15 eShop title, to $40, stopping at $30 for Mario Golf, for instance, really maintaining that $20 Nintendo Selects line, and curating those very prominently on the eShop and refreshing that every so often. There were so many different sorts of experiences, and experiences that were great for a couple minutes play, experiences that were tailored to be much longer. It really was a great amalgamation of everything you'd want from a system that had the fidelity to be more than just a pick up and play machine, but one that still centralized those experiences too.
Yeah. And that I think is what makes the library so diverse. Is we've seen since the Switch has started, and also with the Wii U, which had a significantly significantly smaller amount of digital exclusive titles, that they haven't really cared too much to put much effort into having the smaller, much cheaper, much shorter, much simpler Nintendo published titles.
Yeah.
There are a handful of them from studios outside of Nintendo, like the Stretchers and Good Job and Snipper Clips, but those go by the wayside as opposed to the significant amount of 3DS games from in-house or second-party Nintendo studios that were what gives this system its breadth. But that's not coming at the cost of having a huge amount of released in stores, pressed onto cartridges, full $30-$40 games. I do like that they, for the first time and kind of the only time ever, had significant series that started and basically for the most part ended on the 3DS, and Pushmo and Dylan and Box Boy, which all got multiple entries. Whether or not they were super successful, they were obviously successful enough to propagate multiple sequels and have their own identities, which we just haven't seen from any Nintendo console before or since.
Yeah, to me, the 3DS's eShop in particular is what the shopping channels were always leading towards. The DSi shop channel and the Wii Shop channel. And that there was DSiWare, there was WiiWare, and there is software in both of those that was both original and tied to established IP. Mm-hmm. But it was clear that Nintendo wasn't quite sure of itself yet in terms of how to navigate those storefronts. And so DSiWare became an amalgam of various things, not that it was ever even the focus since it launched purely on a revision of the DS, but the Wii in particular really became the home of Virtual Console, and that was where the bulk of Nintendo's effort went. And from my perspective, the WiiWare side of things was sort of secondary.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the time you get to 3DS, as you're saying quite eloquently, we had these franchises that did exist solely there, and you had the games that were complements, but you had those titles that only made sense at that scale. That HAL was putting out, that Game Freak was putting out, that everybody and their mother had an idea for a 3DS eShop exclusive, and it was executed on. And it sort of speaks to the way, in my opinion, that the 3DS to me so beautifully marries like modern digital sensibilities and Nintendo sensibilities into a machine. The Wii U does this too, I should say, and I got a piece about that in Lock On Volume 5. But
buy now.
But
this is a plug.
This is a plug. I get money when you buy this thing because I make it. I love turning on my 3DS even more than the Wii U. The Wii U has wonderful things in Wara Wara Plaza and Miiverse and everything. But 3DS, from the menu themes to the eShop, to the eShop's games, to the badges, to the customizability, to the music, to the little bits and bobs of the cameras and the spinning 3D icons, and everything about 3DS is so playful and joyous and modern. Everything that the Wii and the DSiWare were setting up, the 3DS executed on so well. And I love the experience and the creativity that underpins 3DS.
Yeah, that's not something that I have ever really focused on myself. I think this was actually the first system outside of the Wii that I owned that had a focus on external from games experience of having Nintendo Badge Arcade and being able to customize your home screen, which I still have never done, and I will never buy a theme for my 3DS. Yeah. Though the fucking clock is ticking on that if you want them. But I do think that if we want to continue this scale conversation just a little bit upward, talking about the fact that there were still a lot of full price, released on cart, released in store games that are much smaller. And I think that a lot of those are ones that do get derided for that. And I think for some of them fairly so. But you talk about games like Pokemon Art Academy or NES Remix or Happy Home Designer. These are much smaller experiences than what you expect out of a mainline Animal Crossing game or a mainline Pokemon game, but they still did support smaller, more spin-off, like very, 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 very spin-off games that they put out into stores, and there is that full range from Happy Home Designer all the way to Sun and Moon and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, the 3DS is really good about that, and it sort of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier of sort of whatever scope of experience you want, it was represented on the system. Um, and frankly, I can't shadow box with this hypothetical person that was upset about the price of Happy Home Designer. I do like that Nintendo was, again, quite efficiently similar to Kirby and other series, as I was saying, okay, look, we made New Leaf, and it was excellent, and most people considered it at that time, and a lot of people still do, the pinnacle of the series. What can we do now? Well, we got a lot of time still. There's a lot of time on the clock. We put out that game in 2012 in Japan, and well, what are we gonna do now? Can't make another Animal Crossing game system. Well, here's what we do: we make Happy Home Designer, and I thought that was very smart. And I enjoy Happy Home Designer a lot. And to me, it just speaks to the ways in which the 3DS library isn't so easily categorized. And I think that makes it quite special. I mean, we talked in our N64 retrospective about how it becomes the party system, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the 3DS really has
a singular identity.
Yeah, has a singular identity in that respect.
And it's also certainly not the 3D, even though that is the intended and launch gimmick of the system. I actually never found 3D to be a core part of the system's identity at all, in as far as at the point that I got my system. I had a 3DS XL at that point. The 2DS was already out at that point and didn't have 3D at all. And I don't know if I ever substantially used 3D, which I think, as you're talking about, just keys into the fact that they were like, yeah, it was a gimmick, and it was their gimmickiest gimmick, and it was also their most unnecessary gimmick, because they just kind of said, no, it's there if you want it. Yeah. But even with games that people purport the 3D for as like, oh, this really enhances experience, something like 3D Land, which is a game that I can certainly talk about at length if we'd like to, I don't think that really changes the experience too much. And I think that that element of the system kind of hides itself for me. So when you talk about the 3DS's identity, the first thing your mind might go to is like, oh yeah, no, it's the only system with stereoscopic 3D, but no, that even Nintendo didn't really care about that.
No, I mean, you're definitely your way of thinking.
Watch your words. Oh, I thought you were saying right, which would have been tough.
Your way of thinking is the prevailing one, obviously.
Yeah.
In terms of how Nintendo themselves position the machine, but I'm quite a big fan of the 3D, especially on this device, because there's a period of time when I just wouldn't play 3D on ever because the viewing angles had to be quite direct. So you would, as I did, because I remember getting my 3DS and thinking, "Fuck, this is amazing." Actually, I wasn't swearing in 2011, so I was saying, "Jeepers, isn't this cool?" Right? And I specifically remember the Ocarina of Time 3D icon. If I remember correctly, it's the Hylian shield and Navi is circling around it or something to that effect.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
And these early 3DS icons are so good about being like hyper 3D. And so I remember like Navi seemed like she was coming so close to my nose, and I would just like sit and watch her do revolutions a couple times. It's like, how is this even possible? But then that goes away. You get a new game. You turn on the 3D. You see how it looks in 3D. You go, okay, I know what it looks like in 3D, and turn it off.
Yep.
These days, because the added camera makes the 3D effect so much wider and more reliable, when 3DS games do have 3D, I do tend to use it. And I am disappointed that Nintendo made the decision, for the most part, to not even include 3D in a lot of the late era games. It's
that's true.
Straight up not there. And it makes sense.
I think it wasn't even in Sun and Moon, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, it wasn't even fully in Pokemon X and Y, which I remember.
Oh, true.
So it was obviously a taxing component of development and a superfluous one. So I've got no real doubts about why it was cut. But I do think that it would have been nice to at least keep around. But
sure, yeah,
it is what it is. I want to point out a couple 3DS games in particular.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sort of in terms of importance, I think maybe the most important 3DS game is Fire Emblem Awakening.
Okay, sure.
Because Pokemon was always big. Pokemon got bigger on 3DS, but that's a given. It still gets bigger now. I'll save my thoughts with that for another date. But Fire Emblem was completely flagging. There was no future for Fire Emblem in the West, if even any future in Japan. And then Awakening...
though the series was like 12 entries in it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But we turned it around with Awakening.
Oh, absolutely.
Awakening sold exceptionally well. It's an exceptional game. It's still my favorite Fire
It's a
Emblem
great
game.
game. Yeah.
And it's emblematic to me of sort of these risks that were taken on the system, and the ways that it
Mm-hmm.
became a flashpoint for a series to find life again. That being a critical example, the same year, Kid Icarus Uprising being another, although that obviously
Sure.
didn't have the reverberations that
No.
Fire Emblem did, spawning now more Fire Emblem games than I could possibly want, hope for, or count. What do you think about this idea?
I think I actually do agree. I
Yeah.
was trying to piece together what you were saying when you said Fire Emblem Awakening is the most important game on the system, and I
Yeah.
think that you're right in terms of impact on Nintendo's future. Obviously, a game like X and Y selling well, a game like Mario Kart 7 selling well, or 3D Land or New Super Mario Bros. 2. These were known quantities.
Yeah.
Some of them to their own detriment. Of New Super Mario Bros. 2, I think for a lot of people being the one with coins and that's it. But Fire Emblem Awakening was the first Fire Emblem game I heard of. I mean, I knew that Marth and Ike were in Brawl, and I saw, I at the point that Smash 4 was coming out, I saw that Robin and Lucina were being added to the game, but I didn't know that there were Fire Emblem. I assumed there were Fire Emblem games, but I never heard anyone talk about them. But when Awakening comes out, and Chrom and Robin and Lucina and the identity of just anything that Awakening did to reinvent the series is what the series is.
Yeah.
Identity is now in large part, and I do think that Fire Emblem being an almost over-present force for some people, I don't think that's necessarily true right now, because it has been. I mean, there's been 2 mainline games on the Switch, a couple of spin-offs, or what 2 spin-offs, 1 half-assed tiny port, whatever. But the prevailing sentiment during this generation is there's so many fucking Fire Emblem games. There's too many Fire Emblem characters in the fucking Smash. It's all Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem, and that's all because of Awakening. That is a hard turnaround. Probably one of the hardest turnarounds we've ever seen a long-standing franchise go through.
Yeah, it definitely was. And Fire Emblem Awakening, I think, was also just a perfect game for the platform.
Sure.
In that it had the more casual mode, so anybody could enjoy it, but it is also as
I think maybe the first time there was a casual mode.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
No, that's not true. It was
okay. I lied. I haven't played any older ones. You have either.
I was under the impression it was also, but I'm pretty sure it's in one of the DS ones. I don't want to speak out of turn. But it popularized a lot of what Fire Emblem is now. And it just, as it has since the GBA, it works very well. You play a battle, and you can suspend it if you need to, play a couple turns, you're done the fucking train, or you want to sit down and scale a whole afternoon's worth of play. The title is epic enough in scope to accommodate that.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was really emblematic of what the best 3DS games did. I think we differ a little bit on the quality of Kid Icarus Uprising, but it's similar in the sense of you can play that game for 10 minutes and do a stage, but you can also append that into many stages because that game is console caliber.
Yeah,
should have been on Wii, but it is console caliber nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated that. It goes to New Leaf also as an example of this. And I just, to me, the 3DS executes on these sort of GameCube feeling and style experiences and their visuals, the amount of content they have. I really love the feel of those 3DS games. And feel is obviously a very nebulous thing about it, but booting up Mario Golf World Tour, which I'd never played until just last night because I'd never had it when it was new. Man, there's so much more to do here than in Super Rush, and there was such a clear feeling that, again, until we're starting to really peter out in the very end of the Switch's life cycle, as you're saying, that there was a lot of love put into every one of these releases for the most part. Now you can shoot some holes in that, but you can shoot holes in literally every system's library.
Of course.
So
absolutely,
it was nice to see so many fully featured games right on that precipice of Nintendo having interest in DLC, not having interest in DLC, wanting everything right on that cartridge when you bought it. The 3DS, as I was saying kind of before, it has a great foot in classic Nintendo sensibilities and sort of modern ones that we are enjoying now.
Yeah, when I think about the scale of 3DS games, I think what endears me most to this system as opposed to the Nintendo systems that come before, and why I'm more interested in the breadth of its library than I am the other ones, is to me these really do feel console caliber. And of course that's an endless cycle. Every fucking new system they put out, it's what's the best handheld graphics at that time. It's console caliber, GBA to Super Nintendo, DS to a little bit better than N64, and this I think pretty much on parity with GameCube and early Wii games. And that really blows me away when I'm looking at the visuals of something like Kid Icarus Uprising or Animal Crossing New Leaf, and I compare them to like Animal Crossing Wild World's the 3DS one, City Folk on Wii. I'm like, yeah, of course it's cleaner because it's not crammed into a fucking 480p screen, but in terms of the detail of the environments, these games don't feel skimpy at all, which I think you can levy a little bit against DS games, as those are much more handheld experiences. They're a little more pared down. It's not a 3D Mario. Well, of course, you got Mario 64, but it's the big Mario of that system is New Super Mario Bros. We're doing a lot more 2D games. Well, actually, there are a lot of 2D games on 3DS, but I really do love the breadth and lack of. It doesn't feel like there's corners cut in terms of the visual spectacle a lot of these games.
Well, I mean, the thing about DS games is, they are punching at a parody of a 3D system, but you had a D-pad and 4 face buttons, right?
Yes.
The circle pad was a necessity.
Yes.
It's
so much better.
Yeah.
It's so much better.
Yeah, so you could now control your games in a way that was much more akin to a home console release, and thus the home console caliber games actually felt more like that, opposed to sort of an illustration of tech. Because there are plenty of polygonal DS games that are exceptional, but they really exist in large part to showcase tech. That's what 64 DS is there for. That's what the DS Zeldas are there for. They're there to show what the touchscreen can do, right? By the time of the 3DS, it's actually, and part of the reason why I think GameCube is an apt comparison, it's a lot like the way in which N64 ideas were refined by GameCube, DS ideas were refined by 3DS.
100%.
You can sort of
made a lot more playable, a lot more fully featured. The visual clarity is significantly better on both those comparisons.
Yeah. I mean, you can basically couple most Nintendo systems in that way: NES to SNES, Game Boy to Game Boy Advance. Sort of as we progress through the systems, though the Wii U you can even make an argument there, but there's, I would say, far more divergence between the Wii and the Wii U than there is between the DS and the 3DS.
And then you draw the line between Wii U and Switch, and that's a much easier comparison to make in terms of portability and local multiplayer and all of that. Yeah.
A couple other games I'd really like to shout out is I love Tomodachi Life, and I know you've been playing that recently. I
have.
There's just some really weird shit on 3DS, and that I really appreciate. Because weird stuff is why I love Nintendo. And a lot of that weird stuff obviously found its way to the eShop foremost. I mean, I'm played like 11, almost 12 hours of Pocket Card Jockey in the last couple of days. Now, of course, minds, I won't say great minds, I'll just say minds differ on this point, because neither of our minds are especially compelling. But
God, no.
You look at the weird shit happening, and it's really lovely. Now, Tomodachi Life, of course, is a sequel. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no fucking idea what goes on in that DS Tomodachi game. But
do you know what it's called? I mean, I don't think it has an English translation. Obviously, it never came to the West. But what's that fucking game called?
I don't know. If you just look up like Tomodachi Life DS, I'm sure you'll find more information.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Tomodachi Life Wikipedia page and find it's actually a follow-up. Tomodachi Collection.
Okay.
So there is an English, easy to say name.
I mean, it might be one I ought or emulate, but this game, much like a lot of the really compelling Wii U titles, does a great job of fusing the hardware and the software together. Because in the case of the DS, sure, you can finagle Mii's into there. I don't know if that game has an in-game Mii creator, if you like NFC link your fucking Wii and DS together. But 3DS, of course, Mii's out of the box. That game, perfect for short bursts of play, perfect for taking your Mii's into the game. It synthesizes all that together and puts it in just a very, very off-putting, but in the best way, package, where your Mii's are being chased by cereal in their dreams, and you're like taken stock of what's happening on the island through a news report that's like through AI generated speech patterns from, I don't know, Grace Randolph as she is in your town and things like that. So I really love Tomodachi Life, and I look back on it quite fondly as one of my favorite games in the system.
Yeah, I think that the element of weirdness in those titles that you're mentioning, like Tomodachi Life and Pocket Card Jockey, that I think is what adds breadth to this system.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot more of those weirder games here than there are on the Switch or even on something like the Wii. There was a couple. You got fucking Link's crossbow training, but I'm not gonna shake a stick at that. But for me, the system shines best in the biggest games that it has, and those are the ones that I have the most experience with. The top favorite 3DS games are the Pokemon games on there and Smash, and those are the games that I'd only played those on my 3DS up until 2 or 3 years ago when I finally got through and played Link Between Worlds, which I think is my favorite 2D Zelda, and games like Triple Deluxe and Planet Robobot. But I think, and maybe you agree or disagree here, but for me, the peak of the Pokemon franchise in terms of consistency, I would say, is the 3DS games. Pokemon X and Y were my real introduction to being so obsessed with Pokemon, and I got a complete living dex in Gen 6 games because they made the really smart choice to have Oras and X and Y complement each other and fill out the entire Pokedex, and it was much easier to trade. And then when you get to Sun and Moon, those games for the first time in the series feel a lot more distinct in terms of breaking up the structure and adding the Ultra Beast. There was so much invention that I think people undersell going on in the 3DS games, because while that was the jump to 3D, I think that there's a lot of elements there socially and creativity wise and reinvention of the franchise wise that really do add so much to the Pokemon experience that the games on DS and Game Boy Advance just never had.
The last thing I want to do is talk about Pokemon for any more than I have to at this juncture, but you're totally right in the respect that for a lot of people 3DS became a Pokemon machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I think that the DS personally was the peak of consistency of Pokemon.
Okay.
As you get Gen 4 into Hard Gold, Soul Silver, into Black and White 2, I think that's a fucking banger of a lineup. But I agree that my favorite Pokemon game is Pokemon X and Y. I love those titles. But it is in large part because of them being quite personal to me. I had, much like you did, a core rotation of 3DS titles. But having my 3DS much longer than you, my core rotation really wasn't the same games yours was. Smash was never even really in my core 3DS rotation for too long, because very quickly I got the game on Wii U and it's like, I'll play this on the way to school, but I don't really care beyond that.
That's interesting. I just want to talk about Smash for a second, because that was, aside from Pokemon, as I said, that was the biggest thing about the 3DS is me and my friends all went to GameStop opening night. Not opening night, but launch night. Right. We all got our copies of Smash 3DS. We were playing the demo. It was the first demo I ever played that had, I think, Mario, Mega Man, Pikachu, and Villager or something like that. And only a Battlefield. But Smash 3DS is my preferred version. So I'm on the complete opposite side from you. I got Smash Wii U when I got my Wii U, and I fucking got Mewtwo because I was just under the wire where you could get them for free if you bought both copies. But I never really felt that the additions in Smash Wii U with 8-player Smash and with fucking you do like missions for Crazy Hand and Master Hand, and the trophies are displayed in like a big battlefield thing. Those elements never really gave it the edge to me, and so Smash 3DS was my preferred version of that, with the trophy collections that they had, with Street Smash, with the minigame where you're shooting up at the boxes to break them and get coins. That was my Smash, and to the point where, and I think one of the best decisions Nintendo's made in terms of connecting consoles together, allowing the 3DS to be used as a controller for Smash Wii U. That was my controller. That's the one I beat all my friends' asses with. So I am a huge Smash 3DS defender. I haven't played it in years, and I probably won't for who the hell knows how long, but I really do love that game, and for me that is what Smash 4 is.
Well, you're definitely right, and it's interesting because let's be clear, I don't have any negative feelings towards Smash
Disdain.
3DS,
Yeah, no, of course.
especially because I think a lot of its modes are better. Smash
Yeah.
Run is obviously far better than Smash Tour,
Yep.
but even like the classic mode is better.
Yeah, the classic mode is great.
3DS.
Yeah.
For me, it just comes down to like I'm not going to play Smash here. Like if I'm playing Smash Brothers, I'm playing with my friends on the TV, so this is
Sure.
not going to
Yeah.
happen. But it's quite interesting because Smash Brothers was probably the last truly significant holdout of Nintendo franchises that did make it to
Yeah.
handheld.
Yeah.
So bringing it to 3DS was quite significant. Bringing it to 3DS first was even more significant because I think that
Yeah.
that said a lot about the Wii U when the home console was not the title that, while it arguably got the marquee version of the game, I mean, the one that everybody plays competitively and everything was obviously the Wii U version. It didn't get it first. It smashed 3DS.
Yeah.
But my rotation did have Pokemon X in it for sure, but it also had Animal Crossing New Leaf, which I played religiously, and Fire Emblem Awakening, which I just played over and over and over and over and over again.
Really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think the 3DS did a really nice job of giving everybody that, giving them their core rotation, their core portable titles. And Tomodachi Life was sort of then, if I was making like if you're looking at like, you know how you see those models of the Earth, like when you're a kid, it's got the core and then
I'm imagining it.
You're stepping out. You put Tomodachi Life in whatever the hell is around the core of the Earth. I don't remember. The mantle?
The mantle? Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I think the mantle's closer to the crust. I don't care.
Yeah, no, there's like a middle layer in between there. The
solar plexus?
No. The PEMDAS? I don't think so.
But yeah, I also love the, let's call them one-off games on the system.
Okay.
You know, as you're talking about Kirby, I think Kirby really, for the 2D titles, really hit its stride on 3DS.
Yeah.
Not only was Triple Deluxe, which is a very good game and a significant improvement over Return to Dreamland, but also in Robobot, which is considered amongst the very best Kirby titles. I mean, I have it
easily.
as probably my third favorite in the series. I think stuff like that was great. Obviously, Link Between Worlds, as you mentioned, was a ton of fun. And I'm also a defender of New Super Mario Brothers 2. That's probably my favorite New Super Mario Brothers game. I think those games just work quite nicely in handheld. But I'm not going to sit here and defend New Super Mario Brothers 2 because I don't care enough to do so. But I was very rarely disappointed by a 3DS game. And I think that's an interesting point of comparison because I was fairly often disappointed by Wii U games. And I'm certainly very, very often disappointed by Switch games. But I think it goes back to what we said before of when a 3DS title came out, it executed on a very clear vision. And it's very rare until you get to the era wherein Mario Sports Superstars is coming out. It's very rare that I'd look at a 3DS game and say, okay, there's another one, right? And there it is. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Camelot's pumped out another fucking sports title. You know, there's a purpose to the releases, and I think that counts for a lot, especially in an era where I feel like we do get a lot of purposeless releases from Nintendo.
Sure, yeah. The intention I absolutely agree with. When you're talking about especially some of the big titles that filled out the library at the beginning of the system's life cycle with 3D Land and New Super Mario Bros. 2 and Mario Kart 7, these are games that were absolutely console quality, that drove their series forward in different ways. Well, New Super Mario Bros. 2, that's a little bit iffy.
That's definitely...
but
it wasn't even the second game when it came out.
That's one of the weirdest fucking choices they've made. But for me, the bulk of the titles that you're referencing as being something that felt like a huge step forward and felt very intention and purpose driven when they came out, that's not something that I can personally attest to. And frankly, those are the games that I find disappoint me most. And that for me, when I'm looking at what makes the library of the 3DS unique, those are not the ones I go to, because I do think that for literally all three of those, they have superior versions elsewhere. And for me, they feel like stopgaps. They feel like filler. It feels like, hey, we got to put a fucking Mario Kart game on the 3DS. It'll be outshone 2 years later by a game that's literally the same but exact better. And same with 3D Land having 3D World, with New Super Mario Bros. 2 having New Super Mario Bros. U in the exact same fucking year. Like, those games in particular, for me, don't add too much to the system in a retrospective light, because I won't recommend someone to go play any of those 3 games. I'll tell them to go play the better versions, which are actually all available on Switch at this point. And because I think they offered a interesting handheld experience for the time, and being as visually clear and impressive and technically impressive as they are for the system when they released. But I do think they have lost their luster in retrospect. They don't offer much historical value, especially with like Mario Kart 7, which just got completely subsumed into Mario Kart 8.
I don't think that the historical value is necessarily the term we'd be looking for, because everything Mario Kart 8 does is owed to 7. I mean, that's obviously the much more... Obviously, would never contest 8 Deluxe as anything other than, in my opinion, the best game in the series. But gliding, diving, kart customization, it all came from 7. I mean, one for one. If anything, there's something to be said about the ways in which the Wii U was at a loss for its own ideas. And so it was following what 3DS did. And so it's interesting, you're right, that those games are better. 100% the better.
And that's really what I mean. I don't necessarily mean that the ideas didn't start there, but when I'm looking back and saying, hey, if you want to get a good idea of what this era of Nintendo was like, I'm not going to point them to Mario Kart 7. I'm going to point them to Mario Kart 8. Well, I'll put them to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is actually currently still ongoing, but you get the idea of when I'm thinking about the library. I don't care to think about those, because I do feel like even in that era, there were better versions of them elsewhere. Versions with a more distinct identity and a little more to call their own. Even though the ideas were carried over, it was like, well, okay, why would I play the I'll be a little bit inflammatory here. Why would I play the 5 out of 10 version of this game when I could play the 7 out of 10 version of this game?
Yeah, but also I feel like you also grabbed onto the 3 Mario games, and I wasn't even really talking about them for the most part, to be honest. I mean, when I start running through titles like Kid Icarus Uprising, Fire Emblem Awakening, Animal Crossing, New Leaf, I'm bringing in the Pokemon titles we talked about. Luigi's mentioned Dark Moon, Tomodachi Life, Link Between Worlds, Triple Deluxe, and more principally Robobot, Mario Golf World Tour, and then we're looking at, Smash 3DS we've been talking about. We're talking about all of these experiences. I think that there is a really great core there. Yeah, and I think the core of 3DS is a lot stronger than the core of a lot of other systems.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, especially because so many of those games do feel distinct compared to the non-existent Wii U counterparts or the Switch ones, which are, fully functional with online and local multiplayer, and they're the evolutions of what those games were, but still a lot of these 3DS games do feel distinct from what has come since, which is something I criticize a lot of different quote-unquote core Nintendo games for, of like, oh, okay, well, this feels like it's just an evolution. I would say play the ones on either side of it rather than the one in the middle, but the 3DS is a very distinct library, which is why I respect and enjoy and want to dig into it so much.
And it has so much new IP. I think that people have always very unfairly said that Nintendo relies on the same 3 core IP. Now, and that might be true on a sales chart perspective, but that's because people buy those disproportionately. It doesn't mean it's all Nintendo has ever made. But especially on 3DS, you got a lot of new IP. As we were saying on the eShop, that became a hotbed for new IP basically constantly. But we even got things like Ever Oasis at retail, which is a game I haven't played, which I would really, really like to. But there was a great spirit of experimentation on this front. And even when the experiments didn't always work out, like Codename Steam. Codename Steam is such a peculiar game that I think it's worth visiting. And also because it's a fleshed out idea. It's not sort of the way that we've been talking about the Switch having games that are just sort of surprising. I mean, you've brought up surprises such as Fire Emblem. Three Houses are more saliently to this. Battle League coming back. Those are interesting because Battle League's interesting because it brought Strikers back. It's not interesting at all by its own merit, really. But
of course,
Intelligent Systems went off and made a third-person SRPG where you play as Abraham Lincoln and the Cowardly Lion, right?
Yeah.
There was scope to really do stuff on the 3DS. Whether it worked or didn't work, you could try things. And I think that's also a symptom of the fact that I'm sure development budgets and costs were not particularly high on 3DS in a large part. We're not talking about HD development here. We're not splitting the atom at all. We're talking about 3DS. And that, much like it allowed developers to do very peculiar things in the 6th gen with GameCube and PS2 and Xbox, it allowed developers on 3DS to just kind of say, let's go for it.
Yeah. And it's kind of the last haven, quote unquote, of that kind of development. I personally don't think that is like a super huge boon in its favor over current game development, because there's such a breadth of development size in terms of indie games and indie games being published, and then smaller games coming sometimes from AAA studios. But I do think that having that cheaper development for the, at the time, most powerful handheld system that we had, that's the last front of that kind of thing. Is we talk about budgets ballooning for the home consoles, for the PS3 and the Xbox 360. The 3DS was the last not HD system. And because of that, a lot of people put their fucking games on this system.
Well, the other thing about it also is that there was an environment that encouraged weird stuff. I mean, you think about the PS Vita. Now, I like the PS Vita a lot, and for the brief period of time that I owned one, I thought it was wicked cool, but what did Sony say?
Yeah, because you weren't cursing at that age.
What did Sony say when the Vita came out? You want to play Uncharted? Here it is. You want to play Mortal Kombat? Here it is. You want to play Borderlands? Here it is. Nintendo's always been good about this, but especially in 3DS, where people had the space to make just like random shit like Pocket Card Jockey, they're saying, here's a platform that can support console experiences, but certainly is not going to turn its nose at games that are very small and portable and bite-sized and pick up and play. The Vita, funnily enough, largely became that because AAA left the platform and indies picked it up.
True.
But from the jump, Nintendo was saying, through their software, we want experiences that run the gamut on our platform. And that also, I think, encouraged the environment wherein Hal could say, we want to make a game about a cube. His name is Cubey. He makes other cubes, and they hop around on those cubes. Isn't that kind of neat? And Nintendo said, well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, make 3 of them.
Vanpool, you want to make a game about a fucking armadillo who wears a cowboy hat and kills rock monsters, and it's a tower defense game?
Make 3 of them.
Make 3 of them. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that, especially now.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Are there any final areas of this system, its legacy or its library, that you would like to dig into?
Do you have any?
Not really, to be 100% honest. I do think we've explored most of what the 3DS has to offer.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I mentioned it in brief. I do want to just talk about the system itself a little bit more.
Okay.
Street Pass is something that we totally glossed over. And I am taking this with me to Street Pass people at PAX. Which I'm very excited about. I think that's going to be a lot of fun as a sort of a send-off to 3DS as stores will close days after PAX ends. Street Pass was so cool. It really made... Because I talk in this Lock-On article about the ways in which like Miiverse made me feel like I was part of a larger Nintendo community when I would open up, let's say... Super Mario 3D World, and I would see Miiverse messages on the overworld. I always thought that was so neat.
Yeah.
But this took it a step further of, I just have my 3DS on me in the real world, going to school, going out on errands, going on vacations, whatever I'm doing. When that light turned green, I was able to have this sort of asynchronous moment with another Nintendo fan, and that made the community feel really unified in this really interesting way. I love Street Pass, and I think it's a major shame that it's probably never coming back, because there's no system that's quite built like this anymore. But such a great idea from Nintendo. Yeah,
and for me, that's the best social feature that they've ever had.
Yeah.
Because I never used Miiverse. I don't even know if my parents would have like let me put in the fucking information that allows me to get. I don't even know it was an app. I have no fucking clue how Miiverse worked. But I did use Street Pass all the time. I have dozens and dozens and dozens of those fucking puzzles done. I never got any of the extra games that Street Pass had that you could like purchase, but I played quite a bit of the Find Me quest game. And there's a third one, wasn't there?
Fishing, right?
Uh, Fishing. Oh, actually, I'm not sure if I ever really did that. But Find Me and the puzzles, I did that religiously. I bring my 3DS in my backpack with me to school every day, and the other two or three fucking nerds who had theirs with them, I would always get their goddamn Mii's, and I would on this car ride on the way home from school, I'd always put the puzzles in and spend my coins that I got from walking, which is another really interesting thing that incentivizes you to have the system on you as it like tracks the like swinging of your fucking leg or whatever to give you coins to spend on this puzzle shop. I loved that element of it, and it's the only element socially of a game system that I've ever fully immersed myself in. I'm not a online multiplayer guy when it comes to home console games. I've never played a home console multiplayer game for a super long time outside of, I guess, like Splatoon. The Switch obviously has a much more gimped social features. The 3DS will, unless that Nintendo comes out with another system that has more portable social features on it, I think that'll probably end up being the most that I ever invest myself in a system's social features, because it came out that perfect time in my life where I was interested in learning about games and taking my system with me. And I don't really bring my Switch with me anymore, because if I'm out of the house, it's for work or school, and I'm not going to be playing my games that much. So I really do appreciate that Nintendo put so much variety in their social features on here, because what other system has games that you can only play by asynchronously syncing up with other people that are like sort of in your vicinity? I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you brought up the play coins too. That there was so much incentive to have this be your companion.
It's been in real games as well, which I totally forgot about until just now.
Oh yeah. I like I'm trying to think of the ones I used it the most in. Could you? I want to say in Smash 3DS you could use them. Maybe to like get trophies, various things.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right.
You could also get idols in Kid Icarus Uprising, which I would do a lot. You could do idol toss by dropping those in. But no, play coins had utility across so many games. And it speaks to the ways that I think both Wii U and 3DS Nintendo is being really smart about saying, how can we synergize UI level software with standalone software and hardware to make a machine that does more than just play your games, but doesn't do it by going down the route that every other device does of making our machine a set-top box.
Yeah.
You could watch 3DS, you could watch Hulu on here. I don't know why you really would. I only really did Nintendo Video in the early days where you could get like exclusive 3D trailers of games and stuff. That was kind of cute. In like 2011, 2012, when it was still a novelty to do so. But Nintendo was saying, we want to incentivize the system to be used in a robust way. Let's make it a pedometer. Let's make it let's make it something that interacts with other systems so that you even know it. I love all that. And last thing I just want to shout out on a UI level, UX thing. The activity log is the very best activity log of any system ever made, and it's a crime 100%. That it was not redone for Switch. Now the one on Wii U, to be fair, is pretty good also.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it is not the one on 3DS. So shout out the activity log. I love the activity log.
Yeah, and also just one final thing that I think also allows it to be a much more comfortable, more modern system to use is the fact that you can use the home button. You can go do other things on your 3DS. You can't go to the eShop, which is annoying, but you can leave your game open, paused in the system's memory, and go do other things on the home screen of the 3DS, whether that's change your brightness, which was a really great feature that I used quite a bit, or go mess with your fucking Mii's or open another app or whatever. I really do think that element makes it feel so much more modern than the DS. Because when you go back and you play on an actual DS, it's all or nothing. You're in the game. Well, I mean, because there's not really too much of a menu in the DS anyway, but the fact that you can close your game and keep it suspended, I really, really do appreciate about the 3DS.
There was no menu button on the DSi, was there?
I don't think there was. I didn't ever use a DSi to a significant degree. He's doing research. Guys on the ground doing research.
I don't think there was one.
Yeah,
I'm envisioning my navy blue DSi right now. I'm envisioning it. I don't think there was one. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm zooming in on it. No, there's a power button and there's a start and select button.
Right. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that that you take for granted. I mean, even the Wii, you were closing that fucking game if you're going back to the home menu.
Yeah.
I think same on Wii U too. I'd have to think about that one, but I'm pretty sure. But to be fair, the extent of the utility is changing your brightness or like a couple little things. There's nothing crazy.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was Nintendo learning little lessons about how to make the system feel new. But Tucker, I think we're basically done here.
Yeah.
I love 3DS. I love it. That's basically, this has been an hour and change way of me saying that I love this system.
Yeah.
And it's really close to GameCube for me, for my favorite.
Yeah, and for me, it clearly is my favorite solely only Nintendo handheld system. I really do think it's the pinnacle of a lot of these ideas. For me, the most feeling like they're actually home console parody games, a lot more invention, a bigger scope to some of these games, and not feeling like they're limited to being handheld games. The experiences are so close to games that released on the home consoles of Nintendo in the Wii and GameCube eras that I'm like, hell yeah, I'm playing Smash on the go, and this is just as great as it is playing Brawl or Mario Kart 7. Like, yeah, it's basically the same as playing Mario Kart Wii on the go. And I really do appreciate that. It really endeared me to the system, and in comparison to some of its predecessors, it feels fully featured. It feels very modern in the menuing that was basically identical, if not improved, over what the Wii had, which no other Nintendo console before that had ever had a menu system. And so I'm a big 3DS fan. There's still a lot of games on there that I would like to dig into. I recently purchased Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. I haven't played any of the sports games on there, though I don't think those are really going to rock my world. Even games like Detective Pikachu, which I haven't played before. Or trying Yokai Watch, which I think is the biggest new IP that the 3DS had, which has since basically gone by the wayside. But the 3DS has a very diverse library that I think people overlook and sort of downplay in terms of how many Nintendo franchises, how many multiples of Nintendo franchises this system got on there. And basically, I would say almost all of them are up on the same level of quality as so many of the other entries. So I love this system. I've been playing it more consistently over a longer period of time than any other system from Nintendo. And I goddamn sad that we're watching the era end, because not only are they not making 3DS games anymore, can't even fucking buy them anymore in like a week or whatever. So rest in peace, sweet prince. So, wait, one of us is right with.
I don't know. I'm not a military man. I don't know. Let's ask Solid Snake of Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater 3D fame.
Of which there are Yoshi dolls in that. I played that game.
I don't like it when you can see the ring light in my glasses, so I always take them off to record.
I don't like it when you can see the fucking whites of your eyes, you know what I'm
saying? They're white?
I know, right? Hello, everyone, and welcome back.
You fucked it up.
Yeah, it was not my fault.
All right.